Jonathan Schanzer is Senior Vice President for Research at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Good to see you again. Thanks for being here. So what's your take on this Syria decision?
Well, I think Lindsey Graham's right, but I think he maybe even has understated the problems that we may see in the future here. Undoubtedly, Iran is set to cash in on this decision. It is probably the most pleased out of all of America's enemies and adversaries who watch this decision unfold. They will be able to establish that land bridge from western Iran to the Mediterranean, supporting Hezbollah, the Shiite militias, and, of course, the Assad regime itself. Don't forget also that we're now leaving the Russians unchallenged in Syria. They're going to have supremacy in the skies. They will be able to do as they please in Syria without so much as a challenge from the United States. On top of that, one of the things that I think a lot of people have ignored here is that the Kurds are going to be left out to dry. The Turks right now are preparing for an onslaught. It's likely that we're going to see a massive battle in northern Syria. The Turks have indicated as much. So you think about it right now, the Israelis are nervous. Probably the Jordanians are nervous. The Kurds are nervous. There really isn't one ally of the United States that's pleased with this, and certainly all of our enemies are very pleased.
Let me push back on that in this sense. I think the president says, look, you leave troops there. What's our national interest? And what's your plan? We just have endless war. Is that it? And we're going to be fighting everybody else's fights. He says, isn't it time for other people to fight their own fights? That's his argument. I'm not saying I agree with it, but that's his argument. What's your response?
Look, I get that, but I would say that the U.S. isn't exactly fighting anyone else's battles right now with 2,000 troops in Syria. What we've done is we've established a beachhead there to let everyone know that we're not going anywhere, and then it's been a deterrent. We're not deploying tens of thousands of troops. We're not putting our men and women in harm's way on a regular basis over there. It's a statement that we're not ready to give up on Syria. That's what we've been doing there. I think we've drawn down, and I think we should be proud of the fact that we've got a minimal presence. We've contained a virus, is the way that I would put it. I don't think ISIS is defeated, but I do think it's been contained, and we had the ability to continue to contain it at minimal cost. And now the president is withdrawing our last line of defense, and in the process, likely thrusting the entire region into chaos.
Well, why wouldn't this be seen as, by some people, I know the American people, is we're just nation building again in Syria. We're going to end up being there, and we're going to have to occupy that territory for a long time, and that's going to cost a lot of money. Is this nation building if we stayed there?
No. Again, we're looking at 2,000 troops. I don't think there's really much of an emphasis at all on nation building. In fact, I believe the United States has already declared that we would not take part in nation building so long as Iran was part of the process, and Iran is certainly still part of the process there. So again, minimal outlay. But again, the idea here was to deter our enemies. Mm-hmm. And I think that we had done that with a minimal presence, a smaller footprint. And I think that really through that smaller footprint, we were proving Trump right. I mean, Trump had made his point that we don't need to send massive numbers of troops. We don't need a major outlay in the Middle East in order to maintain control. And now in one fell swoop, he's just said, you know what, never mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that concerns me the most is the Kurds, because and some of the Arabs who were part of the Syrian Democratic Forces, because they were our agents on the ground, have been, to go after ISIS. In other words, they were taking the casualties on the ground. We could we could help them with aerial cover, with intelligence, with other things that we can do, but without putting our own people in the front lines. But they're taking these casualties, and now we're walking out, and they're going to say, hey, why did we do that? It's going to be very tough to get them to help us again.
That's right. And I think the Kurds do feel as if they've been thrown under the bus here, and certainly we'll have to wait and see what Erdogan does, the president of Turkey. If he decides to turn up the heat on the Kurds in northern Syria, we could see a massive battle. And then there is the broader question of whether the United States intervenes or tries to halt that violence. No one knows exactly what's going to happen here. But I think it's also important to note that if you're a U.S. ally right now and you're looking at this decision made by the president, you're wondering kind of whether whether the president is interested in sticking it out in other key places, like South Korea, like Afghanistan, like Iraq, even where we've got smaller footprints. There's a question now of whether this president, whether the United States, whether this Pentagon is willing to stick it out with some of its most enduring allies. I think that is really the upshot here, and I think there are a lot of nervous friends of the United States looking around right now.
And I guess if you combine that with the report that President may draw down half of the forces in Afghanistan, that anxiety will grow even more. Jonathan Schanzer, thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.